Welcome to the Workflow Show, episode 207, NAB Recap, alongside my co-host Nick Gold and a very special guest, our Director of Professional Services, Jason Paquin.
Hey, Jason.
Hey, guys. Happy to be here.
We never see you around. Who are you?
I travel.
Jason has 7 hats he wears here at Chesapeake Systems.
You know, Jason, he's our back-end lifeblood, whereas Nick and I really spend a lot of time sort of evaluating those environments on the front end. Jason is the brains of the operation in many ways when it comes to that implementation of the infrastructure.
The life essence of Chesapeake Systems.
He's the Gaia of Chesapeake Systems.
Well, the focus on my end is delivery. The focus is deliver what was sold, focus on support, focus on the workflows the client needs, and make sure they're being delivered and efficient.
Meryl and I come up with the grand schemes, and then Jason actually has to make them happen.
Yeah, we're the visionaries, and Jason's the nuts and bolts.
That's one way of putting it. I think that's fair. I think that
as far as a sales guy saying it, absolutely, that's fair.
Exactly. That was a visionary way of putting it.
Indeed.
So we thought it would be great. All of us, a huge number of us at Chesapeake Systems were out at the 2014 National Association of Broadcasters trade show, conference, convention, extravaganza. I mean, what can you really call NAB? NAB is just NAB. It just is what it is.
Yeah, and I'm sure most of our listeners have been. It's actually the first time I've gone under the capacity of Chesapeake Systems, and it's grown as a show, as many trade shows do.
Oh yeah, I think it was my 8th one in a row now, and I look at these old industry guys who've been at NAB, and they're like, yeah, this is my 27th one in a row. And I'm like, I won't even be alive then, man. That's crazy.
You should check your healthy living then. If your life plan is go to NAB and then die.
NAB almost kills me every year when I'm there. It is so draining. We love meeting with people. It's, as you were saying, Jason, it's a time we can kind of see a lot of people who throughout the year just are a voice most of the time. Or at least for some of us here in the organization are a voice, especially people who we work with who are a little farther afield from the East Coast here.
Yeah, I always say my goal is not to walk around and see new technology. You can see that online. You'll get to see it on the floor, but get an idea of it, but meet the people who you only know the voice on the phone.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, obviously some of our field techs deal with these people in person from time to time, but you as the pro service director, sometimes not as directly interfaced. And then Meryl and I, not often going even to some sites that we cater to in person, or if we do somewhat irregularly. The techs would be out there a little more often, and a lot of the work we do these days is remote. So it's great to get together, and that's on the vendor side too. Get to see a lot of people that we're very friendly with, who get to see once, maybe twice a year, network with a lot of people, have some fun. But it's a lot of work. I mean, my schedule Saturday through Wednesday was basically filled 18 hours a day.
From breakfast to well after dinner. Back to back.
I had, pretty much no voice by the 3rd to last day.
That's funny. That was the day I enjoyed you the most. It was weird. But it's interesting. It's a lot of standing and it is a lot of talking. But I also think that's really where a lot of connections can really be generated and sort of fostered. There are people that just by happenstance I ran into, it's
absolutely.
Very surprising the kinds of folks that you see that maybe, you hadn't thought about, and then you go, hey, it's been 3.5 years. What are you doing here? Oh, I'm doing this. And, then there's a larger conversation happening. Definitely the most walking I've done in the last 4 months.
Well, it's what is it? Probably a dozen football fields in overall floor space, if you count the North Hall, Central Hall, front of the Central Hall, South Lower Hall, and South Upper Hall. I mean, it's insanely large, but you do kind of get a pulse of the industry, almost just breathing it in or having it affect you via osmosis. You get this sense of what people are thinking about and just, again, where things seem to be heading. But it's a lot of work, but fun as always, and quite productive this year. So let's talk first, I think, guys, about general impression of the show itself and what it might be symbolic of just where things are at and the momentum and where we are at various business cycles, the economy, just how it relates to what manifests there. Jason, you've been a few times now.
4 years. Yep.
So, I mean, this one seemed bigger to me by far.
I would say it seemed bigger. I would say that the general impression was things are on the upside of the economy. We had a lot of people walking around that were looking at spending money on things that they were looking to actually, had desire to own, and not how can I get something cheap.
The other thing I noticed is, was it last year or 2 years ago where like 3D/stereo was like a big deal, but it like seemed kind of kitschy and fatty.
Seemed forced.
This year, it seemed realer, like the things that people were paying attention to. No one had to really bust out the fads. You really didn't see stereo at all, like
Sure.
in a significant way. But the things you saw, like you're like, okay, there's actually a case to be made for that.
Indeed, and especially when it comes to 4K. I think I actually had a conversation at the Panasonic booth with somebody in passing, and they made some sort of case, something like, well, stereoscopic turned out to be a fad, and like, we really got burned by that, and I feel the same way about 4K. And without even really thinking about it, I was able to give him a point-by-point breakdown as to why they're really not analogous, and 4K really isn't representative of a fad. It's something that's already been here largely for feature film production for many years, and it's now professionalized and now just on the cusp, I think, of being prosumerized.
Exactly, prosumerized,
which is right where you get that approval wide. Like everybody, the moment it's prosumerized, the moment there's ubiquity in the product set.
I'm sure like the iPhone 7 will shoot 4K. It's like that kind of a thing, right?
Yeah, indeed. So I think that was definitely the biggest difference as far as like the things that we're talking about that are buzzwords. They're more than just buzzwords this time around, I feel. 4K is legitimate. I have workflows that are in 4K, and I'm just a single guy, so like, why wouldn't everybody else?
Yeah, with 4K, I noticed a lot of people are the manufacturers want to find ways to even allow people to get 4K content for the 4K viewing devices that they have on the market, and they're preloading basically hard drive systems. I think it's Sony with some of their displays. You basically get this unit that's just a big whopping hard drive that you plug in via HDMI, and it comes like preloaded with some movies that happen to be in 4K, but they don't have a really solid distribution strategy, nor do many people, although Netflix is starting to do 4K online.
Sure.
And again, the whole over-the-top thing makes it easier for people to get 4K if you have the bandwidth. I noticed that Comcast just bumped me for free to 100 megabits down from 50 the other day. So
plus that, and Netflix has paid their rights access to
exactly.
to Comcast.
Now they're a little on friendlier terms. Yeah. So I mean, there's a developing way of getting 4K to people, but really, I think the big deal with 4K wasn't so much on the delivery side; it's on the production and post-production side.
Well, a lot of what I see with 4K with people walking around is a lot of people forget how much it's used in sports. In sports, they'll do a lot of 4K so that when you have a play that you want to give a close-up, you can zoom in on that play and still giving a crystal clear picture on someone's 1080p TV.
Exactly. It just, those extra pixels get you a lot more leeway if you want to do zooming in, you want to crop things, you want to do creative pan and scanning shots, things like that. And so production-wise, the cameras, I think we're at that point where give it a couple more years, and it's like a few years ago there was this turning point where like it became hard to even get standard def cameras. I feel like we're right on the verge of it being hard to get HD cameras. They're all just going to be 4K or even higher res.
They'll be, I feel like they'll probably still be HD capable.
Sure,
but
sure.
like the days of getting a 720p camera done now, and soon that'll be 1080p. I agree. The other thing I've observed, in addition to sort of being able to shoot a wider swath so that you can push in and do all that stuff, is that there's still quite a case to be made for 4K acquisition, but still 1080p or 1080i delivery.
Absolutely.
So a lot of folks they know that this is the wave. It's coming. It might be 2 to 3 years in the future, but if you are generating video data that you intend to use over time, over and over again, then why wouldn't you acquire in the most bleeding edge format? Thus, when you return to that work 3 years from now, you have a native resolution format to just work in.
And, I think some of the best SD that was probably ever shot was at the end of the SD era, when it was actually coming from HD cameras and being down converted. Because just having the quality of the sensor, it's not just about the frame size or even the frame rate.
Indeed.
It's just the overall development of the sensors and, just a lot of underlying and enabling technologies that are part of the sensor upgrades that, even if you are, down-resing to do HD materials now from a 4K plus camera, it's just going to look bigger because you're using state-of-the-art sensors, and then stripping away, some of that data, sure, but you're going to end up with something that's best of class, even if you're not using it for that full raster up front. So, 4K has been talked about for years, but it's like now you can go to Blackmagic and buy like a $2,000 4K camera.
I mean, and the full spectrum of those cameras is now available to us after, the AJA Scion was announced. We'll call that the mid-market beast. Blackmagic cinema cameras, low-end, expendable, ability to create a beautiful image, but, not for the high-end production guys.
Although I was looking at some of the new Blackmagic cameras that they're coming out with.
The production camera?
Which is like, it's just amazingly how inexpensive some of these bodies are. You just, okay, is it an RE? No. But are a lot of people going to put these things, some of the new Blackmagic, one of them is like $2,500, and it's insane for what you're getting for a lot of productions. I think that trend that we saw for a good number of years, and a lot of firms are still doing, of kind of building rigs around DSLR cameras that happen to shoot video, I feel like was probably almost like an interim phase. And I think moving forward, a lot more firms are going to get cameras that are first and foremost oriented around being video cameras, but with form factors and specs.
I mean, that's astute. The Blackmagic cinema camera, it's shooting in raw DNG. I mean, those are still frames that are put together anyway, and you can shoot stills.
But that's what they are, I think. They're these like almost DSL killers, right? Is that they're like, don't try to shoehorn a DSLR into being a video camera when, those manufacturers they don't fully understand just the production workflows that make a video camera a video camera.
Those DSLRs are beautiful for music videos and for other sort of non-traditional
great,
applications.
But
that are,
the sensors and you're going to get a certain look with a full frame size DSLR just because it's a big whopping sensor. But as some of those larger sensor packages make it into these more video form factored cameras, you put similar kind of lenses, you'll be able to get the same stuff you've been getting out of DSLRs with shallow depth of field and that look, that kind of cinematic look that people like. But I think in a body that's going to be cheaper than a lot of those DSLRs, and again, a feature set that's really built around the video folks. And as we were saying, we've got, it's all these cameras from non-camera manufacturers, right?
Sure.
Blackmagic, AJA. I would even almost put Red in that category.
I mean, Red didn't exist before they were Red when it came to making that camera, so I think that's a fair thing
I guess
to say.
what we can call it is like the displacement of Sony, Panasonic,
and
JVC, and Canon, right?
Yeah. And Ikegami, remember them?
Well, yeah, and I mean, you still run into these folks at a few places, but you got Ikegami, you got Fuji. I mean, there's a few others out there, but like when you think of them, you're like, yeah, well, they're production oriented, and cameras is a huge part of what they do. Whereas these other companies, it's like they come up out of where?
I mean, you know what I would put it like? Remember when the HVX was just like hot? The HVX 2000?
200, yeah.
Oh, 200, yeah. Yeah, and like that was the camera that everybody was buying because that's the one. I mean, that's what Blackmagic cinema camera is now. And
that's exactly right.
And the truth of the matter is it's a la carte 4K because you can go on the low end and you can rig it up as much as you want or as little as you want. You can go on the mid-tier and do the same thing, or you can just go sky's the limit.
You know what I like about seeing these cameras out of companies that are more from the post-production space? It seems like they're very good at relating the needs of production to what the post-production footprint of some of those design decisions are going to be.
The questions I always hear about them are, what do they shoot in? Because I want to bring it right into my NLE, and they always expect that those cameras are going to do that far better than anyone else.
Well, and you look at like AJA with their Scion camera. AJA was already in the business for years of doing direct-to-disc recording technologies that were specifically oriented around ease of workflow in post-production environments. I think they probably just realized, well, we could just throw a sensor on the front of it and call it a camera and basically do the same thing. And we're going to have all of that appeal still. So you've got, Blackmagic certainly at the lower end from a pricing perspective of the market. You've got the Scion from AJA, which we're excited to learn more about.
Which Mindful is also, not EF mounted, so it's going to be using cinematic lenses.
PL mount, the whole real deal.
That's right, and and that's where you got to look at the cutoff, depending on what style of production you're doing and what who your end deliverable is, where that's going to be.
Well, it's funny too because it's like glass, good glass, and assortment of good glass has always been more expensive than the underlying system, I think. Even back in the film, cinema film days, your a DP's collection of glass for any production was going to have a way bigger cost imprint than probably the bodies that they were using to shoot the feature. But it's just so hyper exaggerated right now that it's like the bodies are practically free. They're practically free, but then when you go to try to pair it with some good PL mount glass, you're going to be like, what do you mean the body's $2,000, but a good lens for it is, 12, right?
Yeah, and that's par for the course. There's definitely maturation in the market, and I think we're going to see in the next year and a half really where those cards lay. But 4K is here to stay.
Yeah, and again, it looks like there's just a lot of action in the camera space, and then coming out of these interesting corners that sometimes it's about the company's ability to have supply actually get close to the demand that they generate. Blackmagic has always put on a really good show, gotten a lot of people excited. Having products that are fully baked and then available in the quantities that people kind of want them in has been a bit more of a challenge for them. So those are some other issues, is that dynamic of the camera market changes. That was also true for the big camera manufacturers back in the day, but now that the market for these cameras is getting just so much broader because of these lower price points, it's like, shoot, we could, stick a Blackmagic cinema camera in like my, stocking this year or whatever.
Sure.
Not literally.
A pocket camera.
I don't live that exorbitantly. People.
No, you would do 2 of them. But, the other thing that was interesting, definitely about the sort of workflows that I observed on the show floor, I think we're at a place now where we've really well established what an infrastructure and associated workstations and storage looks like for a post-production workflow, right? That's something we've been doing for years, which is, get your centralized storage, figure out those pieces of asset management as the overlay, drive your archive, automate your workflows. Everybody's in the same land. Let's get to work. That works. And, that video environment has been an island in many incarnations. What's interesting now, I think, is sort of the creeping conversation about those workflows being part of the cloud. At least a portion of that process, whether it be review and approve or transcode or some element of typically in-house post-production.
I like to call it the rainbow. Me and one of my clients joke, we call it the rainbow.
Why is that?
It's better than the cloud.
I see. I like that.
It's still kind of amorphous and up there.
Yeah,
but
the rain. That means
on
there's
his,
a pot of
Care
gold at
Bears
the end
and
of it.
unicorns.
Oh, there's a pot of gold. There's Care Bears. There's all sorts of great stuff on the rainbow.
I'm into it.
So, the cloud.
So the cloud to me is interesting. One thing I noticed at NAB myself is in past years, I've heard the crazy questions of, can I edit from the cloud? I want to edit my full res from the cloud. How can I do this?
Oh, man, you'll fall right through it. It's a cloud.
There were actually some answers
There's actually
this
a
year
man called Nimulus
that make a lot of sense, that answer the question of, can I work from the cloud, but realistically work from the cloud? And those include Adobe Anywhere. And they also include using the cloud in a way that's not necessarily for editing off of, which obviously you can't do without some great bandwidth, but review and approve workflows, even some transcode in the cloud to be offloaded, where the cloud's more focused at this point.
It's a tangible cloud. It's like a thicker cloud.
Yes.
Like if you ran into it through with an airplane, like you might actually crash into the cloud.
It's an iceberg.
Let's talk about what this stupid phrase means anyway. To me, it's kind of like the Web 2.0 days, where like that didn't mean anything. It just came out of some apparently brilliant marketing person's imagination.
Who never ever saw a dime. So we're clear.
I don't know. Who knows? Maybe that person is like, they own half of Eurasia right now, for all we know. I mean, it's Vladimir Putin came up with Web 2.0.
Right.
He's like, now that I've entrenched my power with Web 2.0, I shall invade, Ukraine and beyond.
Sure.
But the cloud this is the thing. It is an inherently amorphous phrase, and I want to break it down a little bit, because I see the cloud as a couple of things.
Do you want me to beatbox for you while we do this?
Give me a background. Layer give me a layer there, bro. No, I can't. I can't rap.
That would have been so awesome if you did like a cloud rap.
pretty white, and yet not a Beastie Boy or Eminem. So
Yeah,
it's just
I
not
mean,
going to work
I'm
out.
sorry.
So let's talk about the cloud. I mean, here's my personal definition. The cloud means some layer of your computing technology that is not localized, right? I mean,
Yes.
does it mean anything more than that in its most fundamental form?
Outside of your primary infrastructure. Now, with that said, a lot of times people say, I have set up my private cloud. And
So-
that could be an internal SAN.
So, I mean, and this is what I like to tell people. Like, we've kind of been, Chesapeake has been in the private cloud business for almost 10 years now, because
Yep.
a SAN or even a large shared storage infrastructure, especially one that maybe people have pathways to who aren't in even that physical location, that's kind of what a private cloud is. It's consolidating your resources so it can be shared by a larger group of people in a way that can be centrally managed because of cost effectiveness, utility. It's easier to back up a system that's not fragmented into multiple different systems. It's a consolidated system. And so I think that's all the phrase really means. But then there's this idea of the public cloud, which is using a service provider like Amazon and their Amazon Web Services, or Microsoft and Azure, and a number of others. SuperNAP and Quantum's Lattice offering that operates out of the SuperNAP facility in Nevada. You know, those are more public cloud. You're actually using infrastructure that someone else owns, and you're essentially subscribing to it as a service. Sometimes that's computational infrastructure. You were saying like maybe transcoding services, maybe some element of media asset management in the cloud, distribution services for video on demand files or over-the-top video files through the cloud, archive in the cloud. A lot of the cloud for our client base in the media space is simply storage capacity. That's where another interesting dynamic of the cloud comes. These storage technologies that tend to be in the public cloud aren't file systems in the traditional sense. It's not a drive icon you mount on your desktop and it pops up and you can just point your capture scratch files there. Even if you had the bandwidth to that public facility, wherever the heck that data center is, that's not actually the type of storage technology they're using in the public cloud. They're using a type of storage called object storage, which is basically, it's hiding all of that. You're really just issuing commands to put files into it, get files out of it, copy files between instances that are maybe geo-isolated in different data centers, commands to purge a file from that thing. But you're almost hitting it through a set of APIs, a set of calls that a MAM or a piece of software is issuing to it to push things in, pull things out. That inherently means it's not the kind of storage that Premiere, Final Cut, Media Composer can work with as production storage. Again, regardless of the bandwidth, because the bandwidth isn't there yet. But you see a lot of people still talking about, can we make use of that, or can we build our own cloud out of that object storage technology and maybe start to centralize, say, archives? And this kind of ties into another trend I see. I think for a number of years, our clients, not all of our clients, but there was a desire to have one big silo of everything. Oh, our archive is our production storage, and because it's RAID protected, it is our backup, which is not true, but that's, I think, what people gravitated towards wanting to think.
What they wanted to believe.
And now I think we're seeing an increased sophistication amongst the user base. Even
What
amongst
you're seeing, the best example that I saw of that is the exciting stuff that Quantum was doing with StoreNext, Storage Manager, and Lattice, and also going into the SuperNAP with Lattice and their cloud-based StoreNext, as they were referring to it. And what gets exciting about that is there is a huge value for an organization to have a single namespace, they call it, instead of having multiple drives, multiple silos, different silos of different types of media or different departmental files and assets, being one large single namespace. So one volume, one name, everything's under it. And with StoreNext and Storage Manager, you get into API-driven integrations where you're going from your primary high-speed, high bandwidth storage onto a lower tier storage based on policies, based on the file system, based on APIs, and pushing into things like Lattice, maybe in your personal cloud, maybe in this Lattice based in SuperNAP. And it's still all one single namespace. And so it becomes very easy to work with that from a workflow perspective. Whereas when you get into all these silos, it's really hard to get between all the silos very efficiently.
Well, and that's the thing. I think there's a new willingness for people to accept that silos in their storage are necessary because different technologies are appropriate as different holding areas for media depending on what you need to get out of them. And yet let's make the fact that there are separate silos as seamless to the users as possible.
Yes.
And so cloud-based object storage, private cloud object storage, local level production storage, or even local level nearline storage, we're okay with there being different tiers because we want to choose the appropriate technology for each tier because they have a different use case associated with them. And yet, how can we make it as seamless as possible? And I think you're right. Quantum is obviously onto something with Storage Manager because it is one of the better systems at kind of abstracting away those tiers. I think the other approach that people are looking at, and this is what they're looking to MAMs for,
Yep.
let's start to move people away from simply feeling they need to root through the file system. They don't need to delve into a hard drive icon and navigate folder structures to find the data. The media, the assets, your media inventory, however you want to think about the collection of media files that you work with. Let's give people a database-driven, easy-to-use, front-end, metadata-driven with proxies that we can search through. And then if they need something, kick off a workflow. If there's a flag that indicates that this is in the private cloud sitting halfway across the continent or even on the other side of the planet, let's give somebody like a right-click, bring file local to US HQ, and let the magic of handing that file between these various systems, various networks happen totally behind the scenes, and just give a user a notification when that process is done, and then they know exactly where it is. They can start working on it on their local production tier. But they don't even really have to be thinking about those tiers as much.
And the best side of that is a good MAM system, and even going back to StoreNext with the file system itself. But above and beyond that, a good MAM system can keep record of where are these files. Do I have a copy in 2 locations, 3 locations, 1 location? So it's driving, like you're saying, for you, for the end user, to get the file to them, but then it knows it's in multiple locations. So if that user goes to use it a month later and it's still there, the system knows that, doesn't pull it down a second time for them, doesn't waste the bandwidth or the time to wait for that file.
The other thing about MAMs, as we were saying before, is we at Chesapeake we have a few close MAM partners that we work with really regularly, and we're very close to. We consider them some of our most strategic technology partners, and those should be obvious to everyone who pays attention to our website or listens to this podcast. You guys know who we're working with. But one of the things that's been, and we're always looking at new ones too, because they might fill a different niche, go after a different market. Some of the MAMs that I'm looking at these days don't even really necessarily go after the traditional broadcast market. They might be looking at museums that are digitizing elements of their collections, things like that. So there's a reason for us to have a relationship with many, but I think what we were saying earlier offline was the MAM vendors themselves, I think, are getting better at understanding what their particular platform is ideal for from a customer and use case perspective.
Indeed. I mean, I think long gone are the days where there is an Army Swiss knife MAM. I think even the
or someone could even pretend to have that.
Indeed. I think by virtue of it being a burgeoning vertical, 10 years ago, you sort of had to be it in order for people to have sort of an intellectual understanding as to what it is and what it wasn't. But today, there are so many specific use cases that MAMs can apply to that you almost want to say, well, is it really a MAM? Or should there be some sort of new title that describes what these programs have become?
Well, and I think people used to, and again, talking about the evolving sophistication of the customer base and the user base, I think people wanted to, at one point, see MAMs as a product. But
a lot of people wanted to see MAMs as a workflow. So, MAMs went through this whole iteration where I remember years ago walking through NAB, talking to clients, they'd say, I want to buy media asset management because I need a workflow. And there was a disconnect. That's not a workflow.
They wanted it to impose a workflow
Yes.
that was ideal and perfect in every situation. It came as a product. It had a bullet point of features. This is how you work
It's
with
called
our
an
MAM.
operations manager. I mean, like,
Well, exactly.
And some MAM vendors went with that and tried to be that.
And the thing is, I think they all realized every customer has a different use case, and
Absolutely.
it wasn't realistic. And the customers now, I think, are more willing to engage in an iterative, complex process, detail-oriented, of let's hammer out the jobs that we do, the work that we need to get done when it relates to ingesting things in, distributing things out, the collaborative crafting process
Sure.
of the media, repurposing. What is it we have to do? Let's map it out for our organization. Let's figure out which MAM vendor has the set of technologies that seem like they reinforce the jobs that we do. They're geared around the types of jobs that we do. They can make more efficient the particular jobs we do. And then they offer some additional stuff about areas that we can grow into and do more of down the road. But people, I think, are at that point now where they're like, no, it isn't just a product I buy that's going to do this. It's a process that I engage with. Because MAM isn't a product. MAM is a word like storage. You don't go buy a storage. So you don't.
I tried that at a client meeting the other day. I didn't go, here, you want to buy a storage?
Maybe we'd probably sell a lot more if we tried to simplify things
I
in that
guess
way.
so.
We'd
a
be
storage now for a hamburger on Tuesday.
exactly. We'd be better sales guys if we could actually
Just
just
walk in the
sell
room,
people a storage.
Storage.
Oh, it's the special Chesa storage. It does everything you need. Well, does it? This bit rate. It's the storage. Damn it! It does everything you need.
That's what our product should be. The storage.
Oh, I like that. The storage. But can we spell the TEH, like just so it's all like internet, haha.
Test
Sure,
storage.
sure.
I has
Test
storage.
Test storage? I love it.
I
It's-
have
it's
test
very-
storage.
very-
I has storage.
I has storage.
Hey,
We finally came up with a name for the roller on. See, we just needed to be in this kind of brainstorming environment. I has storage.
So, the other thing about MAMs, I think that I really did observe, certainly this time around, is that, a MAM isn't just really for your post-production workflow. We're seeing the sort of tendrils of media production sort of spreading all the way past review and approve to the analytics and delivery, and then on the front end to pre-production, even budgeting in some cases. So you're looking at a tool set that allows you from front to back to really sort of track the life of an asset. Because the truth of the matter is just when you export something and maybe that's been cataloged by the asset manager and then you deliver it to somebody for review, what happens there? You've lost the connective sinew that may represent a return on investment in your company if you knew more information about that asset after it left the asset manager.
I like that. The collective sinew.
Connective sinew. Yes.
That's very visceral there.
Yes.
Or should I
Indeed.
say
viscous?
evisceral.
Yeah.
But like we were saying, that people are more willing to accept that there's inherently going to be different technology tiers in their storage platform, unless of course they get the storage. But with media asset management, workflow automation, I think people are now more willing to accept that this is going to be a blend of a number of different vendors' products with some customizations on top, and probably not a whole solution that you get through a singular vendor.
Well, I think part of that also is driven by the vendor with the realization that they need to have more of a focus and stick to that focus, and then also an openness to do the integration. One thing I noticed walking around to multiple vendor booths specific to asset management was every one of them had just as long a list of integrations as third-party integrators as they did their own features. And that's huge. It used to just be feature after feature after feature, and they would hide integration a little bit. And over the last 2 years, I've definitely seen a big change in that.
And that's, I think, where the video-oriented media asset management world is finally catching up with the larger, more traditionally publishing-oriented digital asset management world. Myself, have been going to this wonderful little conference in New York called Damn New York for a number of years now, which touches on media asset management in the video space, but really came out of the publishing industry, digital publishing. With them, the dialogue throughout those conferences over the years has very much been on this level. You're not going to find a single vendor. It's about coming up with the solution that you need to solve the job. Do they speak common protocols? Do they have integrations? Do they speak the same metadata formats? Can we get things in and out of them seamlessly to the users, but give people with what their role is the right tool to interact with the overall data set in the way that's appropriate for them as a user. No one vendor's platform we've ever found in the MAM space does that. The DAM world caught up to that a while ago. Now that these database and software automation platforms are coming into their own in the video world, broadcast world, media and entertainment, post-production, it seems like people are finally getting that message as well. We've always tried to kind of
So I think a big
clear.
driver for that too, from one angle, was Adobe Anywhere. I think that's been huge for this media asset management space in general because, thinking back to the amazing days of Final Cut Server, one of the big features was to prepare something for disconnected use, to allow you to send something on a drive out to someone else in the other side of the country to be able to edit on, and then whether or not you edited with proxies and whether or not you edited in place. And what they were trying to do, and then what other MAM vendors after them tried to do, was to be able to allow people to edit remotely when they're not on your primary storage. That was what it was all coming down to, and it's difficult, and it's not something that is a focus of someone who is actually supposed to be writing databases and automations and workflows as an asset management product. So finally, with Adobe Anywhere, they come in with a bit of a solution there, and it kind of takes the cam off everyone's back.
And I think Adobe is now at the point where they're deliberately, looking to create buzz around the Anywhere platform.
And I think it's a
They're
breath
writing
of
the
fresh
book.
air. It's a breath
They
of
are.
fresh air for all the MAM vendors who now can say, we can integrate with them and not have to worry about that part of the workflow. They're doing something right there. We can now worry about what we have actual control
And
over.
Adobe has put a lot of emphasis into trying to make sure they're working with the key MAM
Absolutely.
vendors as well, and they want to see those integrations.
Yes.
And another perspective from Adobe is that they acknowledge that they really need the lifeblood of the integrators as well. I mean, that's the other sort of that's the third leg in this triumvirate. Is really integrators such as ourselves really to get in there and have that knowledge set and know now that the landscape is a little more nuanced and there's not a single product and there's a level of integration across the board. You got to make sure that you got the right folks who really understand that. That's the beauty of the design of what Adobe's doing now, because they acknowledge that they really need minds and eyes like that at Chesapeake and other integrators for us to really move this one forward. I mean, this is going to be a group effort, I think.
Yeah, and just a quick statement to the users, because Anywhere is a sort of amorphous brand name, and it does actually speak to what they're trying to achieve, so it's not an inaccurate one, but it may be difficult to parse, especially when Avid is coming up with their little counter to that, Avid Everywhere.
So the other stuff that we saw some really cool stuff. Nick, I'll let you lead this one, but I love a good camera rig for like a
yeah. There's the so as I've been telling some folks for a while now, it's been my interest to get a drone for hobbyist usage. You can fly them under 700 feet as long as you're not in any kind of regulated airspace, near an airport. There's rules involved. But I thought, what's cooler than having my own private drone as a sign that we are now fully fledged in the future? So I've been looking at models, been following it for a few years, and drones now eat up a huge swath of the central hall at NAB. You've got various manufacturers, and the crazy thing to me is the price points. The one I'm looking at, it's the DJI Phantom Vision 2 Plus.
I love their naming schemas.
It's, a little convoluted, but
VT.
I has drone.
So
MRFMMT.
I has drone, right? The Chesa drone. The thing is about 1.5 feet wide, quadcopter, and the newest version that I'm looking at has integrated HD plus still camera with a 3-axis gimbal. You literally latch your iPhone onto the remote. The thing has like a couple of kilometer range, I think. Or no. It's about maybe a half-mile range. And the way it works is it streams live video to your phone because your phone's Wi-Fi isn't strong enough to go that far. The phone actually talks to a Wi-Fi extender on the remote, and then the remote extends it longer to the drone. So you can go up to a half a mile around with this. You can have it fly on like a preset GPS coordinate path. It's all GPS locked to satellites. You take your hands off the remote. The thing just hovers there because it's locked into that particular space via GPS satellites. You give it a little push, on the, not the rotor blades because that would really injure you a lot, but on the just the bottom of it. it instantly flies back into the position that it was in. I mean, the thing is just like, I don't know, something out of RoboCop or something, and it's $1,300. So like anyone can just have a drone, and these things are cheaper than like a model airplane used to be a couple years ago.
I mean,
still are.
Think about it like this. I don't. You guys all seen The Shining, right? There's
Going down the hallway.
Well, that's a beautiful shot, but the one that I'm referring to is actually the opening shot, which is
The mountains and the roads.
just aerial, right? You know,
Which they used outtakes of at the end of Blade Runner, I should add.
those aerial shots have actually been reused. That's correct. But the interesting thing about it is, like, you know, I watched that and I thought to myself, the kind of like infrastructure and time and energy and equipment rental and like expertise that you need to get a helicopter up there to go and to do several passes.
Oh, thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands
and
of
back
dollars.
then, right? So
and then the stabilization system for the camera and all that. But now you can get a drone. Here's the funny thing. For commercial usage, which shooting as part of a production company would technically be part of, they're not legal to use currently. I'd call it a gray area, but they're not technically allowed right now for commercial usage. Hobbyist is like an exclusion. The FAA is going to be coming out with regulations pretty soon that create a framework for commercial operation of drones. So amongst producers, you can be shooting with drone video. Amazon can be delivering us our packages like they showed on 60 Minutes. All this fun stuff. FAA is on the verge of coming out with a framework, but people are doing it anyway. It's like exploding.
how can you stop people from flying things in the sky? You don't own the sky, is how I feel. Hold on, there's a knock at my door.
Oh, it's Sky Inc.
Yeah.
It's Rupert Murdoch. It's
Right.
like, I do own the sky, mate.
But you know, it is pretty amazing. And of course there are all these rigs that really sort of in many ways replace Steadicam usage. It's really
It has its own Steadicam on board.
it's amazing. It really is that the cost of this technology now, and it's so blasé. Like most folks are just like, yeah, well that's kind of cool, but like we didn't have any of this, you know,
Oh,
the
my
way that we have
goodness.
now.
Well,
It's crazy.
my personal plan for my drone is to kind of like hot glue one of those weird baby doll heads with the eyes that open and close on the top of it.
Very practical.
Hover it outside people's like 4th floor apartment windows.
You would have a 1,000,000 hit YouTube video by the end of the week. Let
Well,
me tell you.
that's the plan. You know, put it on YouTube, have the marketing stuff, so I'm getting a kickback, and then like retire in 3 months.
Well, let's
It's all about the doll with the eyes that open and close, man.
So that is some beautiful technology that can be used to scare people and possibly make some money and quit your job.
So, I mean, but I do think the drone thing and just the production platforms and just the low price, it's interesting to see a technology that is operating in a legal limbo area be very seemingly firmly embraced by a pretty big chunk of the broadcast and media and entertainment space right now. And it's like people are just going for it because the tech is there. It's cheap. No one's really coming down too hard on a mass scale on people who are using this stuff.
I feel like there is a helicopter operator somewhere that is really upset about this
Oh,
developing
they're
technology.
freaking out.
You know,
They're freaking out. I mean, I took some helicopter lessons for a while, and I'm kind of glad I didn't do it when these drones were flying all over the place because those are the types of things you have nightmare situations about. And, you know, it's people need to learn that they're not just a toy. It is a very serious thing to fly a thing around that could either collide with a helicopter or even an airplane.
or a bird.
Well, I don't think the bird is really going to sue you or anything. but-
No, you might.
Or how about this? A kid, like, you know, there are very quickly moving like rotor blades, and you like hovering above a crowd of people to get a good shot, and the thing poops out, which they can do. It's a piece of technology. They're fallible. You know, you could cause some serious injuries. That could be a bad
So
scene.
there's there's some open-ended legality about this, but you know it remains to be seen. But that's the kind of thing I love about the products from NAB. Nothing really made me go, "Oh my god!" You know, it's a lot of we have our head in the game, so we look at a lot of stuff and we sort of see what's coming around the bend. But what out of all the product sets or the sort of like things that you looked at were you most impressed with? Just give me a product.
I didn't actually get to see a demo of it, but someone was telling me about it, and I remember walking by their booth. I'm blanking on the company name, but so what these guys were doing is they would have a camera right up to your face, and they would be shooting your face, and it used, you know, facial recognition technologies to basically map in real time the movements and expressions and everything of your face onto a digital character that you would create, but without having to do the whole series of little dots on your face that normally mocap is done with. And apparently, just by looking at your face and analyzing the structure and seeing the position of your mouth, it can do just real-time mapping of all of that data onto a digital character. And so, I don't know, I start to think about where that technology goes with things like the Oculus Rift VR
Was
helmet.
there stereoscopic behind that to get the depth?
Well, I don't know. I mean, think about how the Kinect works, right? The Kinect and those types of
Okay.
technologies don't see in stereo. They have a way of interpreting the data that they're receiving and kind of deriving spatial data out of it, right?
Yes.
And so I think it's a similar effect, although I believe they were using a just visual realm camera, but yet they could reconstruct the data and figure out kind of what that meant facial expression-wise. And I don't know. I think the real exciting stuff is probably about 2 to 3 to 4 years out, and it's going to be video that's oriented around some of these new virtual reality platforms like Oculus Rift, like the one that Sony showed off at the Game Developers Conference recently that they are developing for the PlayStation 4. I've been hearing about these stereoscopic, every single degree simultaneous audio-video shooting rigs that you can then experience by putting on the virtual reality visor and putting in headphones and move all around, look in different directions, and both stereoscopic video and stereo audio that's relative to the position of your head and the direction you're looking at is just the entire environment around you.
It's pretty amazing stuff, and what I imagine while you're describing that is that immersive world. You're totally in it, and then cut to it's just you walking into a trash can or a wall or something.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, this is so amazing. Conk.
I'm just kind of hoping it's like the movie The Lawnmower Man, because
I hope it's better animated, though that was pretty bleeding
it was
edge for
pretty
the
good
for
for the
1992.
time. Plus, it had what's his name, the guy who was the Bond, Pierce Brosnan, and what's his name, who was Job, the kind of mentally deficient guy who suddenly became a super genius because he was using virtual reality. That's kind of what I'm personally hoping for me.
So you wanna? This is like your Limitless. You're just hoping your Oculus Rift is gonna make you like.
I swear to God, I'm gonna put. I have an Oculus Rift dev kit 2 on order now, and I swear to God, when I don that virtual reality visor for the first time, I feel like I'm just gonna live in like the blissful reality that I've been waiting for my whole life.
I'm looking forward to seeing you 4 weeks later, like totally unshaven and like, what happened in his
Oh,
life?
I doubt I'll even come into the office anymore.
Yeah.
I'll be like, guys, I've just gone completely virtual. You really need to just get
Get your Oculus and
get your Oculus. We have I set up our virtual office. It's a church, but it's like 50 times as big and awesome as the one that we're actually in.
Awesome. I'm there. I saw a lot of cool stuff too, and probably the thing that I saw is the least practical thing ever. But I really liked it because I'm sort of nostalgic at heart. And that was they had actually several hardware offerings to scan your 35 millimeter film, get it HD ProRes, and there was a version of 4K, but looping it through.
Black Magic is selling one now, and the MSRP is like 35 grand. I remember looking at this online a few days ago when I was finally catching up on NAB emails and reading all the things that they were blasting out.
Reading
while we were
about
there.
all the things that happened around you that you didn't see.
And I see this, and I'm like, what? It's like a telecine, so to speak, although
But it's not,
a
and they make a
scanner.
distinction to say that it's not.
A telecine usually spit out a video signal that went to tape.
Well, yeah, and plus you'd have to actually capture it in real time from what was being projected versus from the actual film, depending on the way in which you
So
did
this
it.
is more of a motion picture film scanning technology with
Correct.
direct-to-disc recording. But I'm thinking about this, and I'm thinking about all those labs that have systems that do this that they probably spent more than 7 figures on, or in
Indeed.
the 7 figures for their rigs. And I'm like, now a museum that's sitting on some old film that they have can just kind of like do the digitization themselves. I kind of feel bad for the people who are still amortizing those big investments, but at the same time, it's very democratizing. We spend a lot of time talking to people about archive. People have these archives, and the cost of the service to do it was 10 times more than that. Now they can buy the device to do it on their own schedule, and we'll see how good they end up being.
Well, yeah, sure. I mean, you still have to account for things like audio sync. once upon a time, I interviewed with a company that did film restoration. And while I was sitting in that meeting, I did a bunch of rounds of interviews and a really interesting group of folks. But he gave me some really incredible metric about how much 35 millimeter film simply has not been retained, is deteriorating on a day-by-day basis, and just simply does not exist anymore. This is an amazing way of sort of bringing some nostalgic technology, some aging technology, because we can't go anywhere where we're going without knowing where we came from. And I mean, that's the beauty of being able to bring that stuff in. I mean, there's lots of projects out there that need this, that are deeply tied to today's workflows. So I thought
And
that was
someday,
pretty cool.
when we're just heads floating around in jars, we'll like to think back on the film days.
That's true.
It'll be cinematic, and we'll watch Hugo all the time, and
Hugo. And all the movies. All right.
That's all about film,
that is nostalgia.
film,
That's
and
true.
cinema experience,
Yeah.
and the clickety clackety of film projectors, which you just don't hear anymore at all.
Well, now the big
Last
thing will
Action
be
Hero.
after you use this Blackmagic scanner and you've got all these things scanned in, will you see the pages flipping by of the flip book?
Ooh.
I
Or will it make a pop-up book for you?
Oh, maybe.
And coffee.
So, Jason, anything that stuck out to you?
Honestly, and we've already kind of hashed through it, is drones. I admittedly had been very ignorant to drones. I think they're awesome. I was always intrigued, but I'd never went online and looked at them. And, Nick, you brought me over to the Central Hall, and it was like I was a little kid. I got all these, and I imagined drones that were much larger, and I imagined drones that I didn't realize how small they could get. And I tell you, I never realized the price point either of how cheap they can get and everything that they can do. So drones kind of blew me away this year.
Yeah, Jason's like, I'm going to spy on that neighbor and catch them at all of that stuff that ticks me off and blackmail them. Don't do that.
Turns out that you both are spying on the same person. For one night, there's a baby that pops up and scares the hell out of them. The next night, it's just like, I don't understand.
Yes, people don't steal my baby doll head on a drone idea. That's a Nick Gold special.
That's a
right
Nick
there.
Gold original.
Yeah.
So I'd say all in all, NAB was really great. I'll leave with a parting story. This is how I got to the airport. For 5 days, I was out of the hotel window looking at In-N-Out. Now, In-N-Out, anybody who's on the West Coast knows it's the best, quote-unquote, I'm using air quotes, fast food burger you can get. But it's just really a great burger. And I said every single day, I'm going to go and get them for lunch.
We spoke about it frequently.
We did. I made it like a thing to try to go and do it. Of course, one morning on the way to the convention center, I'm like, take me to In-N-Out on the Strip before we go to the convention center. Sorry, In-N-Out's not open till 10:30. On the Vegas Strip? So I couldn't go. I tried multiple times. Finally, in the taxi cab on the way to the airport, I said, let's go to In-N-Out. I got my 2 double doubles animal style. I ate them on the way. We pulled up to the airport, and right as the cab stopped, I was like, I'm here.
Belch.
And that's how I ended my visit to Vegas.
That's not a bad way of doing it.
Yeah.
That's not a bad way of doing it. I'm not going to comment on
The way you ended your week?
The events leading up to my departure of Las Vegas. All right, Jason, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Your insight is always appreciated, and it's a daily thing that we get to partake in, but hopefully our listeners can catch it again at some point.
Thanks for coming by, Jason. You're the brains of this operation. Thank you.
So don't get in any kind of catastrophic brain injury accident anytime soon.
I'll try my best.
Good. All right, thanks, folks. Thanks for listening, and catch us next time.
Until next time.